Thank you very much, Ridwan. Let me share my screen. Hang on. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Okay, great. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody, and thank you very much for joining me today for this particular session. I think, as you know, this session is about basically an in-depth look at the Islamic wealth management side, especially for individuals. What I'm going to do for you is basically for the next 1 over hour, go into basically certain aspects of Islamic financial planning that is relevant to you as an individual. And then after that, we'll open it up for Q&A. Okay. Sorry. Oops. Why is it? Yeah. So important notice is basically the presentation itself is for education purpose. It's not an offer to buy any product and services. There will be some reference to some performance, and as usual, all these performance are of historical nature. Future performance, of course, past performance is not an indication of future performance. Before I start further, let me just explain a little bit about my company, where I come from. My company's name is called Financial Alliance. We are a licensed financial advisory firm with the MAS itself. We do basically conventional financial planning, and also we do Islamic financial planning. Okay, so I head the Islamic Financial Planning Division, which is called FA, Financial Alliance, Islamic Wealth Advisory. We provide 100% Sharia-based solutions, and basically all aspects, whether it's investment, whether it's protection, zakat, wakaf, estate distribution, and such. We actually, and I'll show you in a while's time, we actually have a group of Sharia advisors or Sharia scholars, so to say. I won't say scholars, they're advisors, to guide us. Dr. Akram Laldin, who is very famous. He's based in Malaysia itself, and he sits with one of his appointment is he sits with the Bank Negara Sharia Advisory Board. We have Ustad Harun here in Singapore. He works directly under me. So he basically is the so-called deputy for FIWA itself. And he is doing most of the legwork, so to say, because I hold two positions, not only as the head of FIWA, but also the head of investment in Financial Alliance. So he does a lot of the work with regards to FIWA. We also have a lady, Ustazah Zarina in Malaysia. So she heads the FAA, Islamic Wealth Advisory. FAA is FA Advisory. That's our branch over in Malaysia itself. So a lot of the things that we put forth to our clients and today to you actually doesn't come from me. It's basically this group of individuals who will formulate where necessary certain fatwas, certain views of how to approach, especially in Singapore itself. Basically, because like I give an example. In Singapore, there's no takaful, there's no Islamic insurance, and we'll learn about that later. So basically, there is this need to formulate a view as to how to accept basically the process to accept insurance, the conventional insurance, as part of the solution for Islam, for Muslim itself, and that can be done actually. But of course, those views must be formulated by people who have knowledge, and this group of advisors here in front of you, they are the ones who formulate this. It's not simply just me, Sani Hamid, who is not qualified to do these things, telling you, I think this is Sharia compliant, or this is Sharia compliant just because and Ustad brought it. It's not like that. So basically, there are certain processes, there are certain best practice that has to be adhered to in order to come to whether a product is Sharia compliant and why we say so, and so on and so forth. Okay. Those of you who have been following us for quite some time, you would know that we hold a lot of talks. We believe basically that one of our fardu kifaya is basically to go out and educate the community with regards to what Islamic financial Islamic financial planning is. We think that basically the community is in need of this kind of education, and rightly so, because it's not taught anywhere else. I mean, you go to madrasas, they don't teach you when you're there. Your so-called weekend classes and so on. It's a lot to do with ibadat, but very little to do with so-called Islamic or financial planning aspects. But it's not just peculiar to Islamic financial planning. Even for the conventional financial planning, it's not taught in schools. Basically, in universities, in secondary school, in A levels, they don't really teach you all these things. You tend to pick it up most of the time after you come out from work, or you come out from school, and you go to work and you start picking these things up. Yeah. So I'm very happy that all of you have put in effort to attend today's course, and I hope to be able to fulfill my responsibility to give you what we call guidelines, to show you what are key things. Of course, we can never cover everything in one session, but I hope that basically with some of these pointers, you'll be able to follow up. Next time whenever you have time and so on. I think we do have what we call more elaborate, more in-depth course, and of course, there's always you can always look up in the internet and so on. Yeah. I think Ridwan has more or less given you a background of my credentials, so I'll skip this. Okay. Okay. I have got a lot of slides, 84 slides, and basically I'll try and finish it by 1 hour, 10 minutes, because I want to leave a little bit more time for Q&A. I'll be talking a little bit fast. I'm quite passionate, and you'll see me sometimes moving around and being animated and such. So you sit back and relax, and inshallah, hopefully whatever I impart to you today, you will find it useful, inshallah. Okay. Okay, so we've got quite a lot of sections or segments to cover. And like I say, what I want to really do is when you finish off this workshop today, you have certain pointers that either you grasp 100%, or they will actually lead you to want to learn a little bit more about them. Okay, so and I really hope that it's just the beginning of this journey where you gain more and more knowledge about this thing called Islamic financial planning. Okay, okay, so let's start. We'll start off with the module 1, Introduction to Financial Planning. Okay, so if ever, and I think most of you probably would have engaged a financial planner to do your financial planning. These are basically what we call pillars of financial planning. Certain aspects of your financial life, which a financial planner will look into. For an Islamic, for Muslim family, for Muslim household, for Muslim individual, there are certain aspects which do not exist in the conventional financial planning, but exist in the Islamic one, which is zakat and wakaf. Okay, and for the rest of them, they are also Islamic in nature. And let me explain. If you look at financial planning, and you look at the definition of financial planning, it is basically a process to help individuals achieve their long-term financial goals through proper management of their finances. Very simply put, financial planning is planning your finances. That's it. Because why? You need to plan because you have long-term goals. And all these are your long-term goals and so on. These are things that help you achieve those long-term goals. Okay, so that's very basic definition of financial planning. Then if you may ask, so why is there a need for Islamic financial planning? Why is there a need for Islamic version? Well, very clearly we all know that Islam is a way of life. We always say that Islam is a way of life. It covers every aspect of our lives, all the way from ibadat, to munakahat. Certain places, of course, in Singapore, yes, you have certain law of the land, and here we have, in terms of families, divorce, marriage, those are Islamic in nature, but we don't have what we call janayah. So basically, janayah, we don't apply the Islamic version of it, but we do have the conventional version of it. But in terms of financial planning or finances, then there's muamalat, which again, it is not driven by the law of the land, but is driven by demand from the consumers itself. And that's why companies will produce things like Islamic unit trusts and so on and so forth. Okay, so we will follow as much as we can, because why? Because to us, Islam is the way of life. Okay. we need to understand where Islam draws these kind of laws from, and we all know very very clearly that the primary source is the Quran. Okay, and then there's the Sunnah, of course, the saying of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay, and then there are analogical deductions, which is qiyas. And what does this mean? If there was something that was done 1,400 years ago, either by the Prophet or by the Sahabas themselves, okay, can we deduce analogically that today, if something similar happened, then based on the actions taken by the Sahabas back then and the conclusions they deduce from it, or the conclusions that came out from it, we deduce that we can apply it today because those two actions are almost the same. Okay, so that's one way of taking what we call something that was done last time, applying it to the modern times. Why? Because the actions are almost similar, and that's qiyas or analogical deduction. There's also something called ijma or consensus of opinion, and that really arises when there's really nothing 1,400 years ago that was similar to what we have today. So if a certain situation arose today, and the scholars look around and say, actually 1,400 years ago there was nothing similar to what the situation is now, and we need to make a decision for the betterment of the ummah, then we will have to come to a consensus of opinions of scholars. Okay, so again, if the Quran sometimes is silent on it, Sunnah is silent on it, you can't make an analogical deduction, then basically scholars will come together and say, this is what our opinion is, we think is the ruling for this particular situation at hand in modern times, so to say. This is how Sharia is being formulated. And also one good thing about it is also because there's flexibility for different times and places, especially on the ijma side. You'll find that it adapts to different times and place. Okay, so it's quite modern from that perspective. Yeah. So when you talk about Islamic financial planning, it's very similar to conventional financial planning. Plan, make sure that you don't have so much risk, your family is left with something and such. But what we do is you overlay basically Sharia aspects or Sharia requirements across this definition or this action of financial planning. Okay, one of the layers that you apply is basically you apply, of course, number one, you need to apply the Sharia. What does the Sharia say that we need to apply to financial planning? Well, the Sharia says there's a prohibition of riba, mashir, gara, and we'll talk about it a bit later. Okay, the Sharia also and the second thing is there are areas which are very pertinent to Muslims. You don't find non-Muslims actually dwelling into these things, and these things are, for example, wakaf, zakat, Hajj. Okay, so it's very peculiar to Muslims. When you do conventional financial planning, these are absent, so to say. Okay, and this is very unique aspect, which I think is very intriguing. You will find that basically in financial planning, for Muslims itself, they are guided, but we all know, of course, Muslims are guided by the Hadith and Quran. Okay, which means whatever characteristics, whatever that is outlined in the Quran and Hadith with regards to financial characteristics, with regards to financial conduct, that governs us. So, if like for example, the Quran says wealth is a trust, which means that you are holding your wealth in trust for Allah. You just cannot simply do what you want to do, which in conventional financial planning is the money is what you earn. You want to do whatever you want to do, go ahead and do it. No one's going to stop you from doing it because it's your own money. Wealth in Islam, no. Wealth is held as a trust, and therefore, as a trustee holding the wealth, you must actually conduct yourself in the proper manner as according to the trust deed, which is what Allah has said. You must dispose of this asset in this manner, this manner, this manner, this manner. Okay, so very, very unique to Islamic financial planning, totally different from conventional financial planning, which the individual themselves can do whatever they want. Yeah? So very unique. Okay? Okay, so simply put, Islamic financial planning is about managing finances in accordance to the requirements set out in our faith. Muamalat refers to the Islamic transactions. Okay, it's very wide. As usual, there's kind of like a process of elimination. Everything is halal until proven haram, and therefore the process of elimination is, we can't do transactions or take part in transactions which are prohibited, the selling or production of impure goods, goods that have zero value at all, riba, usury, gara, uncertainty, mashir, gambling. In any Islamic contracts throughout the whole world, you will find that in order for it to be Sharia compliant, none of these three bottom aspects, whether it's riba, gara, or mashir, will be present in a contract. If there's any elements of this in a particular contract, the contract cannot be Sharia compliant or cannot be Islamic in nature. Okay. Okay. This is probably the most important slide out of my 84 slides. Okay. And it touches on something called riba. Okay. Commonly today, it encompasses a much wider definition, but commonly today we associate riba with interest. Okay. The reason why this is important is because riba is a major sin in Islam. Okay. And if you talk about food and riba, so basically, if I had basically in front of me today, bak kut teh, char siu bao, the very delicious non-halal food. Okay, and I had on my that's on my right hand, for example. So on my left hand, there's this thing called riba, whether it's in terms of money or something I used to buy or whatever, but it actually the source of it is riba. Okay, the scholars are quite unanimous, and when I say unanimous means they are all in agreement that basically if you had to make one choice between eating the so-called non-halal food and consuming riba, then consuming the non-halal food basically is less sinful. It carries less sin compared to basically consuming riba itself. And some of you may find it quite astonishing that wow, we pay so much attention to eating halal food, and you're telling me that actually riba is basically more sinful than non-halal food. I'm telling you that riba is not only more sinful, riba is multiple times more sinful. Okay, and it just boils down to one particular ayat in the Quran, and Surah Baqarah verse 278, which says believers, and so Allah talks to us. Doesn't talk to anybody else, doesn't talk to mankind, doesn't talk to non-Muslims. He talks to us, he speaks to us directly, calls us believers. So be careful of your duty to me, Allah. Relinquish whatever you have of riba. If you have it, just get rid of it. If you are really true believers, you get rid of it. If you do not, then I'm warning you, be informed, I will declare war on you, and your messenger will declare war on you. I mean, it's kind of like goosebumps coming up. This is the only ayat in the Quran, the whole entire Quran, where Allah Himself and our messenger, beloved messenger Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, declares war on a believer. We're not talking about orang kafir or non-believers. We're actually talking about Muslims. So Allah declares war on believers when if they do not relinquish their actions associated with riba, if they continue to be involved in riba. So, and that is why scholars are quite unanimous when it comes to riba. It is a major sin itself. Okay, so people will argue like how you can go and do your Hajj, you can pray 5 times, you can do your tahajjud, you can feed the poor, you can build an orphanage and such, and do every single thing. But if you are involved in riba and Allah declares war on you, what good is it that you have when you do all these things? Because war from Allah is a major thing, and of course from the Prophet himself. Okay, if there's any so-called debate, there's a debate over the so-called definition of riba. Okay, but in terms of the majority of scholars itself, they associate riba with currently this interest that we experience today, and we're not even talking about small interest, 1%, 2%, big interest versus only the large interest is riba, the 1% isn't riba. No, it's by and large an envelope overarching definition. Interest is interest, whether it's 0.1%, whether it's 10%, doesn't matter at all. Okay? And this is just basically the Prophet ﷺ in his farewell sermon. We all know in the farewell sermon is a very compact, short sermon. The Prophet mentioned certain elements, and he, of course, used his last sermon to let us know what's important for us, his followers. And he loves us so much. He says this, and he says, Allah, remember, Allah has forbidden you to take usury. Okay, so very important thing because it was inserted in the farewell sermon. Okay, let me. I know coming from me, it may have certain impact. But if you know this guy, he's Sheikh Yashir Qadri. Let's hear from him because you say, who am I, Sani Hamid? Let's see what Yashir Qadri has got to say about riba. Okay, and let me know whether if you can't hear it, do let me know. Oh, sorry, I need to get rid of the pen first.
Riba. Yeah. And the Quran equated riba with declaring war against God and His Messenger. فَأْذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. There is no other sin in Islam. There is no other sin in Islam that has been equated with declaring war. It's as if you're waging war against your own Creator. There is no sin that has that strict language attached to it. And there are many evils in Islam that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to murder, you're not supposed to steal, there are many sins, and each one has some punishment, there's no question about it. But this specific punishment of declaring war against God and His Messenger, no other sin has been given that description. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is why our Prophet ﷺ forbade interest, and he called it of the major sins. And in one hadith he said, avoid the 7 deadly sins, the 7 sins that are destructive. And of those 7 deadly sins, in that list is murder, in that list is worshipping a false god, an idol, and in that list is riba. Can you believe murder and riba are in the same list? That is enough of
Okay, so it falls in the same category as murder, and even as mentioned, worshipping of idols, shirk basically. So it is. That's why I say it's an important slide. If you've not heard about this and if you did not know about this prior to this, Allah is merciful for those who don't know. He's forever merciful. But now that you know, then basically it falls on your shoulders to do something about it. Okay. All right. So we move on to this particular point where I did mention that earlier on the uniqueness. Oh, sorry. The uniqueness of Muslims when it comes to financial planning, and this is character. This is just a definition of what we call an economic man, an individual in the conventional definition. And if you read through this definition, you'll find self-interest, the word self-interest coming up over and over again. But because that's really what drives the so-called conventional individual economic man. His fulfillment of self-interest is something called maximizing of utility. Okay, and for Muslims, basically, this so-called rational economic man does not exist. You always must remember sometimes what even when you learn about financial planning, when you learn about the conventional financial planning, as a Muslim learning it, you always must remember that basically we Muslims think slightly different, or even quite different from the conventional perspective. And let me explain. A lot of time people come to us, sometimes they say, Sani, I've got $100,000. You know what? I've got a housing loan that actually I have to pay 5% per annum. I've got returns which I can make an investment at which I can gain 8%. What should I do? In the conventional financial planning, it's very simple. You should actually go and invest. You earn your 8%, and then you pay your 5% loan, and then you pocket your 3%. So this is your keuntungan bersih, your clean, your net profit 3%. Okay, but you learn later that basically I will explain to you that Islam says basically loans, while not prohibited, if you can settle it, then by all means settle it. Okay, so if you have the ability to pay off, then of course it's better to pay it off, not to do this kind of like trying to make the spread or make the difference and so on. Okay. The second example is if someone and with my consultants, or rather consultants in my company have come back and given me such feedback before. He said, "Look, I've seen this Muslim client of mine. I presented to him what we call a non-Sharia compliant investment that gives 10%. And then I presented to him also a Sharia compliant investment which gives 2%, meaning to say the past 10 years, this has been the performance. And he goes and chooses this 2%. So this consultant who is a non-Muslim consultant, he's like asking me, what's going on here? Why didn't he choose the 10%? Why did he choose the 2%? Isn't he giving up these gains or potential gains and such? So again, because we know that basically as Muslims, we basically adhere to a different set of rules in many aspects. And in this particular aspect, the ruling is when we choose investments, we have to choose Sharia compliant investments. It's very much the same way when we choose food. Even though the other food is very nice, bak kut teh, char siew bao, whatever the case is, as nice as it is, if the alternative is halal, basically we choose the alternative which is halal, even though it is not nice. Okay. And the reason behind it is actually quite profound. And the reason basically is we as Muslims believe that this world is temporary and the hereafter is permanent. You always must remember that. Okay. The reason why we choose 2% and not 10%, the reason why we do a lot of things that we do is because we believe this world is temporary and the hereafter is permanent. So therefore, give you the example of the person who choose 2% and not 10%. He has given up 8% returns, so to say. And the answer to why he's done that is because let's assume that I'm the person. I believe that while I give up 8% returns in this world, because I adhere to what my creator has asked me to do, which is to take Sharia compliant products and services, I will be rewarded in the hereafter, which to me is more important, because the reward will be everlasting. It's a permanent place. It will be multiple folds of this 8%. So while I lose, so-called, in this current world, in the hereafter, I'm a winner. So that's really how Muslims basically, this aspect of temporary world, dunia ni sementara, akhirat adalah kekal. That is really the essence of it all. Okay. One thing that Muslims also must remember, there is no such thing as Islam discouraging wealth. Okay, and basically, it is not wealth that is the issue. Wealth is neutral. Okay, wealth can either be good or evil. That's why it's neutral. Okay, so it is the love for wealth which Islam is against. When you allow your wealth to control you, that's when wealth becomes negative. When you control your wealth, you can do a lot of things with your wealth. Been a masjid, been a orphanage and everything like that. Then basically you control your wealth, and that's when wealth becomes a positive. Okay. And always remember, the end does not justify the means. From non-Muslims, you will often hear, "Oh, this guy is very good. He went to build a orphanage, a hospital, and so on." And you realize that he gained his wealth from basically opening up casinos, or he's a bank. He's been managing this bank, or rather this bank actually belongs to him. He's become a multi-millionaire thanks to the bank and stuff. But again, that's really what we call the means to an end. While the end is good, i.e., you spend in a way which is positive, building, giving to the poor, building hospitals, orphanage and such, the means of getting there always has to be halal for a Muslim. Okay, so no such thing as Robin Hood in Islam. Why? Although it's good in terms of giving to the poor, the fact that Robin Hood steals is not acceptable. Okay, and again, one of the hadith says here that if you use a clothing which is obtained from a forbidden source of income in prayers, your prayers are not accepted. So even if you pray, that's the end result. You pray, but if the clothes that you use in prayers, they are obtained from duit haram, corruption money, stolen money, stuff like that, then basically that is again your prayers are not accepted by Allah. Okay. Okay, so in general, you can also look at how a Muslim conducts himself or herself through the lenses of what we call the income statement and the balance sheet. So you always ask yourself when it comes to income, is it halal, expenditure, have you provided for the poor, assets, have you done your wakaf, liabilities, have you actually taken on too much debt and debt which is unnecessary. I will go through each and every one of them very quickly in order for you to have a good idea of what to look out for when it comes to yourself. Okay, so of course income is very easy. You must make sure that basically your primary source of income, where you work and where you gain your salary, these are basically from permissible source lah. Because this really is where you spend everything from your food to your clothing and so on and so forth. Okay, and I think we've gone through this. But nowadays, because you don't only earn an income from your salary, you also earn income from investment. So when you make an investment, you also get dividends, you get gains, capital gains, and so on. And that's really where you now have to also make sure that whenever you invest, the investment has to be halal. Because otherwise, it's going to go back to the same old thing, which is when you accumulate money in a provident manner, then even if you donate your wealth, you get no blessings. And sometimes you also get sins because of that. Okay. The other aspect is expenditure. Okay, so this one basically is you must always remember that Islam is the religion of a middle path, meaning to say that basically it is there is a need for moderation, and we all know, we cannot be like 100% focused on this world, and forget about the hereafter. Okay, and yet again, Islam says you cannot be 100% focusing on the hereafter and forget this world. Because we are living in this world after all. So you need to have that balance, that moderation to balance both sides of it, to pay attention to this world and also to the hereafter. And that's also when it comes to spending. Okay, so when you spend moderately, not excessively. Okay, you must always remember part of your wealth is held for the poor. Part of this is because of zakat, which we will talk about, and also part of this is basically you knowing that it pleases Allah when you actually spend on the poor itself. Okay, and hoarding of wealth is absolutely a big no-no in Islam, and this is really like holding on your wealth, not spending, because this is what I mentioned earlier, a true reflection of someone who has fallen in love with his wealth. You hang on to it, okay, which is again a very, very, very bad thing in Islam. Okay, so that comes to this is expenditure. When we move on to basically the balance sheet itself, the first most important thing, I think, sometimes when we talk about assets and liabilities, a lot of time people talk about making money, the asset side and such. My own view is the liabilities are important, and here's where we go to module 2. And this is why it's inserted here as module 2, not even module 3 or 4. I think managing debt, managing liabilities is key for every Muslim individuals and household. Okay, even though basically there is no prohibition in Islam to say you cannot take on debt. There's no ayat in the Quran or no hadith which says, wahai orang-orang Islam, anda tidak dibenarkan mengambil hutang and stuff like that. Don't have. Okay. Instead, you will hear even the Prophet SAW basically supplicating dua to Allah, Ya Allah, I seek refuge from you, from sin and heavy debt, which means that it's allowed, and Prophet is asking Allah's protection from ever being in what we call heavy debt. Okay. From an Islamic perspective, accruing debt or getting debt is basically a serious matter. Okay, so it's really out of necessity that you should get it. I mean, since why do we kind of have that sense that having debt is not something that is good? Well, just basically from a few hadiths. Number one, when you die from 3 things: arrogance, cheating, and debt, you will enter paradise. Okay, I mean, you know that this is bad, and now you also know that this is bad. Okay, the soul of a believer is held hostage in his grave until his debt is paid off. And there are a lot of stories about it. A story about a particular person who mati shahid, who died a martyr's death. and the Prophet didn't want to semayang janazah, and people were asking why this guy, he mati syahid by the, by right, he's the most beautiful way of dying in Islam, mati syahid. Why didn't the Prophet want to pray his funeral prayer? Because he was in debt. Okay, he was indebted to someone, and then the Sahabas came together to pay off his debt, and then everything was okay. Okay, so from these stories, from these hadiths, you can understand that while there is no prohibition, and the reason there's no prohibition is because Islam understands that certain period in your life, you may have to borrow because of basic necessities, food, shelter, clothing, but don't go into that unnecessarily. Because if you get trapped in it, then you have these things to worry about. Okay. So what Islam does very beautifully is Islam sets basically terms and conditions of how the character of the borrower and lender should be. If you've ever borrowed money, then please be mindful. First of all, if you pay off your debts, you are among the best. You borrow, you pay. You remember that you borrowed from someone, you kept track of it, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you must always remember that basically, in terms of that, always keep track of what you have actually borrowed from other people. Don't take it like it's okay lah. I borrow, it's only $10 and such. No. Okay, you must remember. Okay, then secondly is basically you must have intention to repay it. Do not like borrow and then forget about it. Because why? Because if you don't have intention to repay it, Allah will bring you to ruins, and that is a big thing. Bringing you to ruins is a big word. Okay, so please be careful about that. And I think a lot of time, one more thing is the lender. Okay, Islam actually encourages debt forgiveness. Okay, and this one, there is a specific Quranic verse on it. If the debtor is in difficulty, grant him time till it's easy for him to repay. But if ye remit it by way of charity, that is the best if you only knew. Okay. Most of you are probably much younger than me. In your lifetime, you will be lending money to people. People will borrow money from you. I assure you that a lot of times you won't get that money back. Okay, and when that happens, you will become angry, you will become upset, and a lot of times it darkens your heart. Okay, it darkens your heart. And when that happens, the original action of lending money to someone, which is actually a positive, you get good deeds for it, you dapat pahala, ends up you dapat dosa because of blackening of your heart. You putus silaturahim, you don't talk to the person, you cut off all relationships, sometimes even close relatives or even brothers and sisters itself, and so on and so forth. And that becomes a sin. Okay, so Allah says very beautifully, if someone doesn't pay you, then basically you just forgive him. Because why? If you knew, I will actually be repaying you in the hereafter. I mean, Allah says just let it go. You're not going to get it back anyway. What you can do is you look forward to me repaying you in the hereafter. I mean, that's very beautiful, right? So it's something which I think every one of us should adhere to. And the major principle is, if you think you cannot handle this, if you think that money, if you don't get back, you're going to get angry, then don't lend money in the first place. Don't let it out, or don't go and lend money out to someone because 9 out of 10 times you won't get it back. 9 out of 10 times you'll find yourself in this kind of situation. All right? Okay. One important thing that's got to do with that is you must know where it comes from. If you know where it comes from, you can actually eliminate it. And when you eliminate it, you basically don't fall into that trap of being entrapped with debt. And that really has got to do with cash flow management. One example I'm going to show you here, okay, is to understand where it comes from, okay, and what it does. Okay. The most simplest way of looking at it is through what we call monthly balances. If your monthly balance is negative, okay, this one you must memorize. Monthly balance means your income minus expenditure. If your monthly balance is negative, two things will definitely happen. Assets will decrease, debt will increase. If your monthly balance is positive, assets will increase, debt will decrease. So as a Muslim, what do you want? Islam says, I want my debt to decrease. How do you achieve that? Monthly balance which is positive. Okay, always bear that in mind. Okay. I've got this example here, which I just want to go through with you extremely fast to hit the point home. Okay, which is if I start out every single month with minus 200, if I have good savings of 1,002, if I have zero debt, guess what happens to me after 6 months? Minus 200, minus 200, minus 200, minus 200. After 6 months, my saving becomes zero. Why? Because when I have a negative balance every month, I need to draw out my savings to pay that negative balance. So if I originally had 1,002 and I overspend every month 200, after 6 months, I deplete my savings totally. And then the subsequent next few months, I still have minus 200, minus 200, minus 200, minus 200. What happens is I don't have any savings. I start owing people. I start not paying my bills. My M1 bill now starts showing a negative balance and so on. And at the end of 6 months, I will start having a debt, total debt of 1,002. 6 months times minus 200. So you can see that this minus 200 here leads to two things. Savings from 1,002 becomes zero. Debt from zero becomes 1,002. This is what I was telling you about, the negative one. Savings from 1,002 becomes zero. Debt from zero becomes 1,002. Why? Negative balance. Okay, so always remember that. And the same thing happens, or rather the opposite happens when it's basically positive balance. Okay, so what happens is if you have a positive balance, after 6 months, you can actually save up. You can save up money because why? Now you got money in your hands. Okay, and you can also pay off your debt. Oh, sorry, there should be one here. And then you can use your positive balance to actually pay off your debt. So if you have a positive balance every month, you will find two things will happen. Number one, your debt goes to zero eventually. Number two, your savings will go up. Because when you have $200 in your hand, that's when you can bayar hutang, bayar sampai habis. Lepas tu, simpan lah. Then you save. Okay? So it can only happen when you have a positive balance here, right? The problem is whether you are positive or negative every month, okay, and this is not COVID, this is your monthly balance, okay. You can only tell when you actively pursue knowing what your spending is. You tend to know what your salary is. Everybody knows what your salary is. What you tend to lose track of is how much you spend. So a lot of us don't really know how much we have at the end of the month because we don't track our spending. So okay, so there are many ways to go about it. Some people diligently do it on an Excel spreadsheet. Some people use apps. Many ways. You need to know whether you're positive or negative every single month. That is absolutely important. Because why? If you're negative and you don't know about it, every single month you are draining your assets. You'll reach a point where you find that your debts are going up and you don't realize why. And I'm telling you why. Because you have a negative balance which you are not aware of. Okay, so please make sure you realize whether you have a monthly positive or negative balance. Okay, one way. Okay, so now moving slightly away from there, I'm just trying to teach you a bit of how to manage your money in a more disciplined manner. I for example, get a salary. When I get my salary, I do what we call automatic transfers out from my salary to different accounts, and I have various accounts. Okay, via standing orders. What that does is it takes away 100% of my salary. By the time the 5th of the month, I'm left with 30% in this original account. Because 10% has gone here, 20% has gone here, 20% has gone here, 30%, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this 30% that I have here in my original account is what I use for the rest of the month. But I don't have to worry about all the bills that are coming throughout the month, whether it's the first week bill, the bill on the second week, bill on, because all bills don't come on the first week, or the bills will come throughout the month. All of them are settled. My savings are settled, my insurance are settled, my car is settled, everything is settled. Okay. What happens is this. I just give you an example. This is I stay in a condo, so I have what we call, I don't have conservancy fees, but I have this management fee and sinking fund and so on. Every quarter I pay $828. I'm supposed to pay that. Okay. Last time used to be quite frustrating because every time I receive this bill, which is every 3 months, it's 828 times 3. I have to fork out that amount. Okay. Right now, what I do is every month I just automatically deduct and send it over to this account, this management account, and so-called prepay, pay early. So I always pay a bit more, and therefore when this bill always arrives, not only do I have zero to pay, I will find that I have accumulated a certain amount in this particular management account. Therefore, if I stop paying, for example, I get retrenched and stuff. It will start eating into this balance. So therefore, I'm safe. I'm okay. So this in itself is your emergency fund to a certain extent, not necessarily in a particular account, but in this case, in your in my management account, sinking fund account. You can do this for your phones also. Or pay a little bit more, $10 more every month when you pay your Singtel bill. You'll find that this balance accumulates. If anything happens, you can't pay, it actually eats into it, and you don't have to worry about being penalized and so on. Okay. Credit cards, a very quick one. My own view, if you own a credit card, you are holding on to the most dangerous financial instrument that can bring a destruction to your finances. Okay, because credit card allows us to spend much more than we have. Okay, so if you have many credit cards, you will know that each credit card allows you 2 times your salary, credit line another 2 times, and so on and so forth. I have found, basically, I'm the advisor to a particular center called the Debt Advisory Center here in Singapore. We have found basically that people who run into credit card problems, they have very huge balances, especially now we're going to a recession, for example. You might find it tight, and you might start utilizing some of your credit cards to pay certain things because the situation is not good. Your salary has decreased, or inflation has increased, and so on. You must be very mindful about this, because this thing can snowball very, very fast. Okay. All right. So we spoke about the balance sheet. We spoke about the liability part, and now let's move on to the asset part, which is the investment part. Okay, so the investment part, basically, gentle reminder, why is it important? It's important because all your income, whether it comes from investment capital gains, whether it comes from dividends, should by right be halal, because again, otherwise it is very problematic, so to say. Okay, in Singapore, when you do an investment or when you put your money somewhere, you will either put it in a regulated environment or a non-regulated environment. Okay, regulated environment are people who are actually regulated by the MAS, or we've got the financial institutions, we've got traditional investments like unit trusts, you've got alternative investments, and these fall under what we call regulated framework. There are some non-regulated ones, forex trading, crowdfunding, some investments here and there, and so on. Okay. This non-regulated doesn't mean it's a scam, doesn't necessarily mean it's a scam, but because it's non-regulated, sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell, but doesn't necessarily mean it's a scam, just to let you know. Okay. When it comes to financial institutions, if you want to conduct your financial planning according to Islam, then basically you look for what we call Islamic versions of your banking facilities. Okay, you can go to Maybank, CIMB, and to a certain extent OCBC. Okay, but Maybank and CIMB will give you kind of a wide range of solutions. You've got Islamic saving accounts, you've got Islamic checking accounts, you've got Islamic so-called deposit term accounts, the equivalent of a fixed deposit account that's Islamic in nature. Okay, so it's all there. I mean, of course, the only thing that sometimes people will say that the ATM machines are not a lot, and so on and so forth. That is again another issue. But if you wanted to do everything Islamic wise, you can basically, because the facilities are all there. Okay. Let's talk about shares. Okay. How do I know whether my share is Islamic in nature? Well, there are a few ways to go about it. I know there are sometimes websites where you can look to see whether certain shares are Islamic. We ourselves, basically, we use a particular software called Ideal Ratings, where you can actually go and see whether a particular share is Islamic or not. Okay, this software itself will tell us 2 things. Whenever you want to see whether an investment is Islamic or not, you'd have to test it. You have to do 2 filters. Filter number 1 is business description. Is there anything in this business description which is prohibited? Does it deal in anything which Islam says cannot? That's number 1. Okay. If everything is okay, then fine. Then we move on to filter number 2. Filter number 2 is it has to fulfill certain ratios. That means if it has cash, the cash cannot be too much. Why? Because if there's too much cash, then the cash put into the so-called bank account, then you'll start earning interest and such. If you have basically interest-bearing instruments, whether you're holding on to bonds and stuff, you cannot have too much of it. When you hear me saying cannot have too much means can still have, but there are thresholds. Why? Because when you look at companies such as Singapore Press Holdings, these are companies which are originally what we call conventional companies. Scholars have said it's okay as long as we can ascertain that the conventional companies are doing businesses which are considered to be halal, and when we look into their finances, they are not extreme in terms of holding things which we consider to be haram. Too much interest, income, too much liquidity, too much of this, too much debt. Once we can allow a certain amount, and if they keep to the threshold, we can then say this company is Sharia compliant, is permissible. But if they cross the threshold, then we cannot give them the pass, so to say. We cannot allow them to be considered Sharia compliant. So you will find Apple, Microsoft going through these filters and coming out either as Sharia compliant or non-Sharia compliant. Okay. One thing to note is basically after passing the business activity and all these ratios, okay, you buy the share. When you receive something called dividends, okay, you must do something called purification. For every dividend that you receive, you must go and purify certain parts of it. Why, you ask me, why, if you consider it Sharia compliant, why do I still have to purify? Well, remember, in the analysis of making it Sharia compliant, we did allow a certain portion of what we call haram aspects to remain, because we do agree nothing can be 100% halal. We allow a certain threshold. This threshold is the one that you actually need to purify. Okay, so this is really how it goes. We don't want we are so sensitive to haram money that basically we anticipate when you pay me dividend, you are paying me part of the profit of the company. But because we did allow or accept that this company has certain elements of haram aspects to it, we will purify these haram aspects. And this is it. Okay, so very interesting, right? Okay. More interesting is this. If you currently today own shares in Singapore, okay, you will find that your shares can fall into two categories. One is they are either Sharia compliant or non-Sharia compliant. When they are Sharia compliant, it can be Sharia compliant at source. We used to have this company which was Sharia compliant at source. In Singapore, no longer. This path no longer exists. All the shares that are considered to be Sharia compliant in Singapore undergo this second path. And this is where your SPH, SIA, Singtel, M1 will go through this. And what did I mention earlier? If they qualify because their business activities are okay, if the financial ratios are okay, then Alhamdulillah, they are Sharia compliant. Except that when they distribute part of their profit to you, you will need to purify that profit. Okay, but when you make gains on basically the share price goes up and you make that one no need. That one don't need to purify. You only purify the profits, i.e. dividends. You don't need to purify the capital gains. Okay. There's this other element, which is what if you are holding on to a non-Sharia compliant? When you do the analysis, business activity, alamak, genting. When you do the ratios, wow, this guy holds so much interest inside his account, didn't pass. Okay, so when you have a non-Sharia compliant shares that you're holding on to, you have two decisions, or rather you have two paths that will cabang, so to say. Number one is you are actually making money from this share. Why? When you see the share price and you see whatever dividend that you've received throughout the years when you're holding on to this share, you add them together and say, well, I'm making money. I'm not losing money. Even though it's haram, never mind. The aspect is I'm making money on it. When you're making money on a haram share or haram investment, you immediately dispose of it because you're not losing out anything. You immediately dispose of it. Okay. Basically, The gains that you've made, you then need to purify. If you had invested $100 and then basically when you add the capital gain and dividend and you now made 110, that $10 needs to be purified. The original $100 that you put into this share, you can take it back. Your principal is yours. Your original duit pokok, you can take back, no problem at all. You do not want to touch that haram part, which is the $10. Because why? Because it comes from a non-Sharia compliant investment. Okay. Let's say now you're making a loss. You add your capital gain, capital loss, and you add back your dividends, you're still making a loss. You bought this thing for $100 and now it's only $90. You're losing $10. Okay. Some people, they will still, you can immediately dispose of it. We doakan that Allah will reward you for this. Okay. And then whatever that's remaining, $90, you take it back and that's halal. Because it's part of your principal, it's part of your duit pokok. It says that's left $90. Okay. But Islam also says you can delay it if you want, which means that instead of $90, you wait for it to go up, okay, to a certain extent. Maximum is $100. Then you can withdraw. What do I mean? You can wait for it to go back to 100, and then you can take back your principal. Yeah, it's halal. 100% of your principal is halal, your original principal. You can wait for it to go back to 97. Why? Some people say at $90, I losing $10 cannot. But if I lose $3, I'm okay. Okay lah. Then you wait until 97. Then 97, you get out very fast. You quickly get out. Because why? It's haram. I don't hold on to it. But at 97, I'm okay. At 90, cannot. Okay, so at 97, you sell. You take the $3 loss. It's okay. But you're also allowed to wait until 100. It's still okay also. Okay, so I hope I'm kind of clear here. If you hold to a compliant share and you hold to a non-compliant share, totally different way of approaching it. When we talk about unit trust, okay, in Singapore, there are not many Sharia compliant unit trusts, probably in the region of 7 to 8. There's some new one coming in and going out and so on and so forth. Okay, but it also means that if you want to do your investment from a Sharia compliant perspective, you can do it, no problem. Okay, here is just showing you the conventional one a lot, Sharia one not that many. Okay, but it's grown a bit. I think now it's about 7. Okay. One thing you must also remember, Sharia compliant does not mean no risk. Some people think that just because it's Sharia compliant, there's no risk. No. Sharia compliant just means it's Sharia compliant. It's like your food. Sharia compliant doesn't mean it's healthy. Correct or not? Yeah, you could still be eating a lot of KFC and stuff with a lot of fats and stuff. It just means it's Sharia compliant. Doesn't necessarily mean it's no risk or it's healthy food. Okay, so you still need to control your risk. Whether you're an aggressive investor, then you do the appropriate thing. If you're not a conservative investor, then you put more sukuk, what we call sukuk or bonds, and the Islamic bond, so to say, which is less volatile. Okay, so the blue one is what we call sukuk. Okay, as you can see, I'm sorry I colored it red, but it's less volatile. Less volatile means not so risky. This is equity, Sharia compliant equity, more risky. Okay, more volatile. Okay, so you mix and match it to get your appropriate so-called risk profile itself. Okay, so basically you can actually mix and match so that you can get the appropriate risk profile appropriate portfolio for the appropriate risk profile itself. Meaning to say, if you are a conservative investor, you can actually create something which is Sharia compliant by adding all this and mixing all this. If you are an aggressive investor, you can mix and match in order to create something which is suited for you. Okay, and this is really what we are talking about when we talk about portfolio allocation. And all of this is Sharia compliant. Okay. The treatment for shares and the treatment for unit trust is exactly the same. If you have a unit trust which is Sharia compliant, no problem. Gains, dividends, whatever you have, you can use it, okay, because it's Sharia compliant. Because unit trust basically a slight difference from shares, because remember I told you this path doesn't exist in Singapore. But in unit trust, it's 100% Sharia compliant. Okay, once it's 100% halas, you can take whatever you want, no problem at all. Okay, when it's non-Sharia compliant, then the application is the same. Are you making a profit? If you're making a profit, get rid of it. Take back your principal. Gains, purify it. If you're making a loss, Can you take the loss? Yes, I can take the loss, no problem. I don't want to hold this non-Sharia compliant thing even for a single night. Who knows, tonight I may die. Get rid of it immediately. Take back your principal. Whether you're left $70 out of 100, whether you're left $80, take it back. That's halal. You say, cannot. I've lost so much money. I need to wait for it to come back to at least my principal in order for me to get back so that I don't lose that much or I don't lose at all. Can. You wait. Why? Because in Islam, you are allowed to take back your principal. Your principal is halal, except that the gains are not halal. Why? Because it came from a non-halal source. Okay. Misconceptions about Sharia investing. Okay. A lot of people feel that Sharia products are inferior to conventional products. When we look at the numbers, sometimes it does suggest to be the case. If you look at it, this is Sharia compliant. Top here is Sharia compliant. Bottom here is non-Sharia compliant. Sharia compliant 100%, non-Sharia compliant 170. Sharia compliant 75%, non-Sharia compliant 100%. Alamak, how come like that one? Well, because it's not apple-to-apple comparison. Always must remember non-Sharia and Sharia carry sometimes different sectors. In a Sharia compliant investment, you don't find, for example, finance, banks, insurance. You don't find casino, gambling, and all these things. For a conventional, you do find. When the economy is doing well, these are some of the sectors which do well. So they tend to outperform. They tend to do better. So my question to you is, when you look at this thing here and you say, I lost 70% if I take the Sharia one, that's not the way to approach it. The way to approach it is, I've avoided this 70% which comes from sectors which my religion has said don't get involved in. That's the way you should approach it. Okay? But in reality, I've done this for many, many years, and we don't see a very distinct difference sometimes in terms of performance between Sharia compliant and non-Sharia compliant counterparts. As you can see, they move more or less the same way. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you here is basically that it is a fallacy. It's not really true that every time when people say sometimes that Sharia compliant one not very good, the conventional, no. In fact, if you look at this, you will basically find that the blue one is Maybank Sukuk, the red one is Franklin Templeton Sukuk. The Sukuks have done better than the conventional. So the Sharia compliant one has done better. There's a reason behind it. I wouldn't have time to explain to you, but I just wanted to show you that it's not true that conventional and Sharia compliant ones are inferior, cannot make money, always lose to the conventional. No, absolutely not true. Of course, there are certain times it's true, certain times it's not true, and this is the time where actually Sharia is even better than conventional. Okay. This one I need you to understand also, okay, because this is something that you will be facing in your journey through life. It is when you see two things and they look exactly the same. I take one KFC from Thailand, I take one KFC from Singapore. Do they taste the same? Do they look the same? Do they smell the same? They look exactly the same. Do they give you the same amount of vitamins, proteins, mineral, fats, whatever the case is? Exactly the same. Why don't you, as a Muslim, take this? Why must you take this? And you will tell me, because this one got halal sign. What does that mean to you? But the utility is the same, kan? Your enjoyment of it is the same. The proteins and benefits, nutrients are the same. Every single aspect is the same. Why can't you take this one on the left hand side? Oh, because it's halal. Well, what does halal mean? Well, basically, halal means that it is a requirement set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah says take halal food, and the definition of halal food is how a particular animal is slaughtered and so on and so forth, you take it without questioning the fact that these two actually give me the same benefit. I'm taking this because this is halal. Okay. Some people may say this is blind faith. Okay. I may say something controversial, but bear with me. Some people may say, but that's part of our religion. Our religion says there's heaven and there's hell. I don't have to see that there's heaven and hell to prove that there's heaven and hell, because my faith tells me that there is heaven and hell awaiting and I hope, of course, to go to heaven and to avoid hell. Okay, my faith tells me to eat halal food. There's no need to be a particular reason to why I should be doing it. It's because my faith has said to me. Of course, today, from a scientific perspective, there are proofs that basically halal food is much better than non-halal. Whether in terms of the way animals are being killed, it's more humane, and the health of the meat that you derive from halal animals, which is less susceptible to bacteria because the blood has been drained, and so on and so forth. So this is basically things that even without it, you would still choose because Allah has said do this, and that's called faith. Okay? There are certain things that you are not able to see also, if with respects to this, is also the contract. So this applies very much to financial instruments. Financial instruments basically, Islamic mortgage, conventional mortgage, Islamic insurance, conventional insurance, pay the premium. Anything goes wrong, Islamic insurance pays me. Anything goes wrong, conventional insurance pays me. Both also pay premium every month. What's the difference? Well, the difference again lies in something that you can't see, and is how those contracts are structured. There's a way to structure Islamic contracts. There's a way to structure conventional contracts. Okay, so sometimes the feel and look from the Zahir perspective may look the same, and you say, what's the difference? But from the Batin perspective, there is a difference. Okay, always remember that. I won't go through this. This one basically is just to tell you about the difference. And I'll go through it because I want you to understand the fairness behind this. Okay, I'm actually one eye on time, and I know Ridwan is like Chisani is already like 9 o'clock. Okay, anyway, from the contract perspective, we spoke about conventional insurance. Okay, let's take car insurance. Did you know that basically in conventional insurance, I would set the premiums that you pay on a conventional insurance based on your experience, your car make, are you a male, female, how many years have you driven, have you been involved in accident? I will charge you, for example, $1,000 per annum on your car insurance. Okay. Takaful, same thing. They will charge you $1,000 on your car insurance. Okay. But the Takaful car insurance will say this: if any elements which I've used to gauge your so-called experience and so on, okay, any of these elements change, then I will actually refund you. What do you mean? Well, say for example that in this year, the expected car accident rate was supposed to be this for your category of drivers, but it turns out to be this. That means there's not much claims. Why? Maybe traffic police had a very strong anti-safe driving campaign. Maybe this, maybe that. All we know is basically the amount of accidents on the roads in that year was very little. So much so that basically insurance company overcharge you when they actually estimated your premiums. Takaful, refund. Refund. Not the whole amount, but to the extent that it now shows you what the actual thing is. Why? Because everything earlier on was based on an estimate. I cannot do that. I must be based on reality. And when the real data comes out, if it overcharge you, it's not fair to you. I will refund you. Conventional, thank you very much. That's my profit. Which one is fairer? Which one is fair? Yeah. And same thing with deposits. All these things you cannot tell from the surface. Car insurance, pay premium, accident, get the car. But you cannot, this you didn't realize. Same thing with deposit. There are certain elements behind it which makes it even fair to the bank and so on. So you must always remember certain things you cannot see, but it is Sharia compliant for a reason, and some of the reasons is basically in the contracts and such. Okay. This one, I just want to say basically something quite straightforward. We all know that Allah has said, when we don't know something, seek that knowledge from someone else. Let that someone else take that burden instead of you. And what do I actually mean? What I actually mean is there are certain times in your life where you may question certain Sharia products. Oh, benda ni rasanya tak halal lah, you know. It carries a Sharia compliant chop, but Allah, this bank, you know lah, these people, they pay the scholars and stuff. Let me tell you, my own personal view is you are going down a very dangerous path. Okay, when you make something which is halal, which has been given the Sharia compliant chop by scholars who have gone through a whole analysis from Quran, Sunnah, Ijtihad, everything, Ijma and everything. They go through this whole process and they give this halal chop here. Okay, this is halal. Okay, and you come along and say, no, I don't think so. Okay, so you must be very careful because you are now trading in a very dangerous path. A path where Allah has already said, the Messenger has already said, someone is condemned when they say something, which something is halal, they say is haram. Okay, and even vice versa. Okay, why? Because when scholars make decisions on these products, they make it both on public and private information. Okay, they are accountable not only to, of course, the public, but even to Allah. Let them bear that burden. Janganlah kita pandai-pandai and say, oh, this is, go and put on our Facebook, whatever, this one is haram. Allah will question you the next time, who were you to say this is haram when it is actually halal? And you have actually spread throughout so many people to tell them this is haram when this is halal. I mean, that is going to be such a bad situation. So you must be very careful. Okay. Please prioritize your Hajj and Umrah. The fact of the matter is we are Muslims. It is one of the pillars that we adhere to. Of course, I'm saying this because we tend to go travel. It's reopening and such. Okay, we want to go Germany, we want to go Korea, watch BTS, and so on and so forth. But we must remember that even though it's a queue, even though it's not our time yet, show that effort. Show Allah that you are serious. If Allah, you give me tomorrow the opportunity to do my Hajj, with your grace, I will have the money ready. I will not forego that opportunity that you give to me. Who knows? I mean, Allah is the best of planners. Okay. Meanwhile, Allah, I'm in the queue. The queue tells me 50 years more. I will adhere to it. I will hope that I will get it early. But meanwhile, I want to see the place that I'm supposed to go to. This place, which is one of the pillars of my religion. This place where the Prophet had stood and spent his life, both in Mecca and Medina. I will save up to go and see this place even before my Hajj, because my Hajj is later on. Put in the effort. Show Allah that you are sincere in wanting to fulfill this, even though the Hajj hasn't arrived yet. Okay, so we also have helped our clients to set up portfolios to try and save up for Hajj and Umrah. Okay, and when it comes to investment, I'm telling you, there is one investment in the whole wide entire world for Muslims, which I consider to be the most important. Okay, and this is called Waqaf. Okay, we'll talk about Waqaf later on, but I just wanted to give you a preview of why Waqaf is important. Okay, it's very clear that the Prophet has said, when you die, only three things will continue to give you good deeds, nothing else. Okay, charitable acts which continue, knowledge which is beneficial, and filial children. Okay, we'll start with filial children. I have two kids. I have trouble even asking them to study. I have trouble even asking them to go to bed early. Okay, I pray that I hope and pray that they will pray for me. I have no control over them. I'm now teaching you knowledge. I hope you use my knowledge that I teach to you so that I can get it as a waqaf. I cannot control tomorrow. You may just switch off your PC later and not even know what I've been talking to you about for the past 1.5 hours. The only thing I can control is charitable acts that I've made. Why is this important? Because when you die, when I die, none of us will know what our books on my left and right hand side of my shoulder, what the balance is. God forbid I enter my grave with a negative balance. My sins outdo my good deeds. If I have no waqaf, on the day of judgment, when I arise from my grave, the books are unchanged. I will wake up with basically more bad deeds than good deeds. Betul? Sebab nothing has changed when I was lying down there because no waqaf. But if I had done waqaf, as I lay down in my grave, Allah has already promised me, the Prophet has already said, good deeds shall continue to flow if one of these things had been done. And to me, the continuous charitable act is the one that I can control. If I had done that, as I lay down in my grave, pahala mo datang. The pahala will drip into my grave, and my right side of my books will continue to increase, despite the fact that previously was low, now it's high. So when I am awakened from my grave on the day of judgment, inshallah, the books have been turned around from negative to positive. And why? And then I realized, Alhamdulillah, it was that wakaf which I did. Therefore, when I laid in my grave, it actually benefited me. That's the reason why this is one of the most important investments you need to do. Okay. All right. Risk management, insurance. There are no takaful insurance in Singapore. But first and foremost, insurance is halal. Okay. The concept of insurance is halal. Of course, it's like food. Food is halal. Okay. But there are certain aspects of it. There is non-halal food and halal food. And insurance is the same. Non-halal insurance and halal insurance. Okay, it's very clear that Islam says you need to control risks. Okay, and this is really what insurance is all about. Okay, but there's no takaful in Singapore. So basically, Muiz has said, you Muslims or you Muslims in Singapore, you need to decide how you want to approach this. So Muslim as a Muslim. So Muiz has effectively thrown the ball back into our court to say that we should actually seek our own scholars, okay, to try and see whether we want to take on insurance or not. Okay, because certain scholars have different views about this. On my side, I have taken the view of the scholars I showed you earlier, Dr. Akram, Ustad Harun, and so on. Okay, and they have come up with a fatwa based on the doctrine of necessity, fatwa based on darurah. Okay, and darurah basically is whatever that is haram, which is the conventional insurance, you can take it when basically there's no alternative, but you must take it at the bare minimum that is needed. And you can only use it for the amount of time that you are in darurah. Okay, so basically what you find is, if we come across a certain family, okay, where the parents or the father is the sole breadwinner, for example, has no assets. If he dies, basically what happens is the family has nothing left because he has no assets. Okay, he can take a certain type of insurance, which is called a term insurance. Okay, and why? Because term insurance is just pure coverage. There's no investment element. We don't mix any investment element because investment has riba in it. We take a pure insurance. Okay, we cover it basically for the extent that his children that he would leave behind if he's no longer around grows up to be adults. So, for example, family of 4, there's one kid who is 3 years old, another kid which is 5 years old, and then there's the wife, and then there's the husband. Okay, husband dies, must make sure that the wife has enough money to bring up at least the younger boy or girl from 3 years old to maybe about 25 or 23 years old, depending on NS and so on and so forth. So he has to cover, for example, 20 years. So this husband must have a term insurance for 20 years to give the wife enough money to bring up the whole family. That's a necessity to us. That's the bare minimum that this husband must leave behind for the wife. Of course, you take away all your CPF and so on, then you adjust your insurance amount. But this is really the bare minimum. Otherwise, the husband dies, you leave the wife with literally nothing. Okay, so to us, that's important. Okay, so I won't go through this. I do apologize because of time. I think some questions may even crop up later on in the Q&A. What if you currently own a conventional policy? Okay, we know, and I've told you, that conventional policies are haram. Okay, so basically, when you have something which is haram, you are allowed to take back your principal, no problem. Whatever is in excess, if you have made a gain out of this, then basically you need to purify it. Okay, you need to purify it. But you must also understand when we talk about necessity or darura, there actually could be a reason why you can hang on to something which is haram, because darura makes haram into halal. Give you an example. Sunny, I have now a insurance policy which I've taken up for 30 years. It's meant to supplement my retirement or give me a retirement money. Okay. But now I realize that it is non-Sharia compliant. Do I need to get rid of it? Then the answer is no, you don't have to. Basically, when that policy expires, or when you need to, or when that policy is supposed to give you the money that you need, okay, you take the money that the policy gives to you, you minus out first of all your principal that you've been paying for the past 30 years, which is a big chunk of it. Okay, that belongs to you, no problem at all. Okay, then you ask yourself, the remaining money there, the profit that this policy has made so for the past 30 years, do I need it? Am I in a situation where I actually need it because I have no other source of retirement fund? Then automatically that money becomes halal instead of haram, because it's a necessity, without which your standard of living, you can't, now you don't have enough, because why? This was part of your plan for retiring. So without that portion, you're gone. But if you over the past 30 years have accumulated other sources of income elsewhere, and this now is pocket money to you, then you say, then yeah lah, because this is no longer a necessity anymore. I've actually over the past 30 years, alhamdulillah, managed to accumulate other sources of income which are halal, and this happens to be haram, so I will just go and donate this away. So you see how the principle works when it comes to things which are haram. You can actually make it halal if it actually is, there's a necessity to it. Okay. All right. Final one or two slides. Estate planning. If you are currently married, you have family, okay, either a husband or wife, especially if it's a husband, you just need to remember this. This box which I'm drawing now, this represents your immediate family. Okay. As long as your father or you have a son is around, okay, when you die, all your assets will be distributed to the remaining people in this box here. The reason why it doesn't go out to your brothers or sisters, is because your father is there and your son is there, the male heirs. Okay? Without HEIRS, not hairs, without your father, and especially if you don't have sons, let's say you only have daughters, okay, when you die, you're the husband, you die, then your siblings get part of it. Our recommendation is, if your brothers and sisters are people who can look after your family, then that's fine. But if you've not seen your brother for 30 years and you know, stuff like that, and then there are certain things you can do. All right. So basically, you need to bear in mind that let Farah decide until you feel that you're uncomfortable and you need to do certain things. Okay. Of course, in Singapore, estate planning is quite advanced for Muslims. There are 3 things in Singapore which you basically can straight away give to your wife, for example. Number 1, when you die, your home goes to your wife as long as your wife is one of the names in your home, HDB. Okay. Your insurance, you can nominate your wife. Your CPF, you can nominate your wife. So even before anybody says anything, when you die, these 3 things basically go to your wife. So what's left to be distributed is whatever outside of these 3 things. Okay, so this is something which is important. If you're married, you have children and you have family, sit down with your financial advisor to see. If you don't understand this now, sit down and try and understand where you fall, where your family falls, if some falls within this category, what happens within this category if you're no longer around. Okay. As I mentioned, 3 aspects, 3 biggest assets for a Muslim. If you've not done, this is automatic. If you've not done your CPF and insurance nomination, and you feel that your wife should inherit from you, and you want to make it simple for her, then go and do the CPF nomination and insurance nomination. Okay. remember we spoke about how important wakaf is. Okay, Muslims can do wills. The only restriction is you can only will away a maximum of 1/3 of your assets. Okay, so basically, in your whole total assets, you could take up to 1/3, or you can take up less, no problem. Okay, and one of it basically you can always state down there, I want to wakaf a certain amount. So let's say you don't do anything while you're living, while you're still alive, wakaf is still created upon your death, but it must be through a will. If you have a will, you state it like me. In my will, I state 10% of my assets go to MUIS, for example. There's a particular wakaf in MUIS, and so on and so forth. Right? Lastly, as a Muslim, you must pay a zakat. Why? Well, because it's one of the pillars of Islam. You need to say, if you say the Shahada, well, you are then accepting the other aspects or the other pillars that comes along with it. Praying, Hajj, and zakat is one of it. Okay, so you can't run away from it. If you already profess yourself to be a Muslim, you must pay your zakat. Okay, so the question, of course, what do you pay on, and why do you? When is it triggered? It's triggered when there is a minimum amount that is crossed. Okay, and it's triggered when you hold it basically for a certain number of days, 1 year basically. So, for example, nisab now, which is the so-called threshold. If your savings account or your investment crosses a certain threshold, and this is the threshold, you need to pay 2.5%, and you've held it for 1 year. So that's zakat. Okay, and zakat is payable for a whole bunch of assets. And so you need to, if you don't know, there's a lot of information on zakat, whether it's on MUIS and so on. And you can approach us. We'll tell you, insurance, you have to pay zakat. This is not the life insurance, but this is basically the endowment. Okay, you need to pay zakat on this. Okay, just give you an example. If you have an endowment insurance, okay, on the anniversary date, go and find out what the surrender value is. If the surrender value is already above the nisab, you need to pay 2.5%. For investment, find out what the cash value is on the 31st of December. If the cash value on the 31st of December is above the nisab, and you've held this for 1 year, you need to pay zakat. This is just a rough way of telling you what, for these two particular assets, when you need to pay zakat on these two. Okay. This boils back down to us being Muslims. When we hold our wealth in trust for Allah, Allah says certain part of your wealth doesn't belong to you. Certain part of your wealth belongs to these people. It's not yours. Okay, so make sure you give them their right. Otherwise, in Akhirat, they will come to you and say, why didn't you? I had the right to your wealth. Why didn't you give it to me? You cannot say you don't know, because it is basically part and parcel of being a Muslim. Okay. Lastly, when you're, again, wakaf is so important. Okay, when you are alive, you can actually do wakaf. You can create a portfolio, and then you tell yourself, when this portfolio reaches a certain amount, I'll take the money out and I'll go and wakaf it. Then you create a wakaf. You can go to MUIS, and you can go and wakaf something called wakaf ilmu, and every single dollar, starting from even $1 itself, give it to MUIS. MUIS will manage it as a wakaf, and automatically that's your wakaf. Okay. When you're dead, there's only two ways to do it. One way, unfortunately, no longer is available in Singapore because they no longer have Sharia compliant takaful insurance. Last time used to have, now no more. The other way is via a wasiat. You must make sure that basically in your wasiat, in your will, you write down there, please take a little portion of my 1/3 or less than 1/3 of my money and give it out as wakaf. Then automatically you create a wakaf after you die. Okay. All right. Sorry, Ridwan. It's also 9:30. I thought I could finish a bit earlier. But anyway, I hope, do apologize if I did mention, I did warn everybody I was going to rush through. I could have made this whole thing shorter, but I was just afraid I missed out on something. I think everything's important, but time is not of the essence. But I hope that by just giving you this whole bunch of stuff, it kind of like you have in your mind now, oh, these are important, I need to find out more about this. That's really the idea of me presenting a whole bunch of stuff in a very short period of time to you. Okay. So I'll open it up to Q&A, or Ridwan, I pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zani.
Yes.
As expected, you will
You expect.
run. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but then we have around, let me just check, around 23 questions.
Wow.
They are
Okay.
they are rolling in. So
Okay.
the first one with this like is a recession coming? I
it's a, it's a
you answered this question in the previous June wealth management
okay.
talk.
Come.
Yeah,
Let's do.
so
Okay.
is there
Let's do
any
a.
updates or
Let's.
something? Yeah,
Yeah. Let's do a fire. Kata fire.
fire chat,
Fire round. Is it?
chat, you know.
Fire chat. Fire round. Pa, 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 pa. Okay. A recession coming. Yes. We have Europe slowing down. We have China slowing down. We have Japan slowing down, and the US is now showing signs of slowing down. When you have all the top economies in the world slowing down, you are going to have a global recession. Okay, done.
Okay.
Uh,
All right, Ken. So is financial planning for those who live from paycheck to paycheck, no savings but no debt? How to increase wealth for a start?
no savings, but no debt. How to
So
increase
he's
wealth?
living.
Oh,
Yes.
sit down, work out what I mentioned. Salary minus expenses. Okay, when you say living paycheck to paycheck with no savings and no debt, then automatically what happens is salary minus expenditure should be zero, because you basically can't save and yet you're not accumulating debt. So I'm assuming it's zero. So you need to then find out, how do I make this into a small positive? The only way you can do it, or rather the two ways you can do it, is either to increase your salary by working another job or overtime and such, or the slightly more simpler way is to actually try and cut back some expenses. What you want to create is, you want to create that positive balance, because that's the only way you can increase wealth. With even a $10 positive balance every month, that is basically wealth. You've just created $10 of wealth.
Yeah, nice. Okay. So next question: how to calculate zakat?
Wow, there are a lot of things there.
Money in
Okay.
the bank, gold, crypto
Yeah,
investment.
yeah. I would actually direct you to Mui's website, which I think Muis has one zakat website by itself. Ridwan, do you remember zakat.org or something like that? Zakat.sg, yes. There are a lot of information there, and even calculators and so on. So I think that I wouldn't be able to do this. Is actually just one whole 2-hour session on this. So I would actually direct you to zakat.sg to find out what's zakatable, and even the various zakat calculators and so on.
Yeah, if not, then can just approach Firewall as well.
Yes, we can help you also.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. Can you elaborate on Sharia compliance? What is Sharia compliance? Actually, there's a video on it, but then if you want to elaborate on it.
Okay. So I assume here you're talking about investment when we talk about Sharia compliance. Okay. Sharia compliance means adherence to Sharia. It complies to Sharia. What does Sharia say? Sharia say whatever this particular business that you're going to invest in, and share purchasers are actually investing in a business. Okay, it's ownership of a business, should not be involved in things with the Sharia, which the Sharia prohibits. And we know the list of prohibition, gambling and all those kind of things. Okay. Then the second thing is, what other things does the Sharia prohibit? The Sharia prohibits interest. Where does interest come from? Holding too much cash in a company's balance sheet, in a company's banking account. When you hold too much cash, you got interest. When you hold too much assets, which are interest bearing, that means you earn interest. They provide you interest. When you have too much debt, why? Because Sharia says don't have so much debt. So when you have companies where you have too much debt, too much interest earnings and stuff, then they ought not to be considered to be Sharia compliant. So that's the second filter, and that's where all those financial ratios come into the picture. So Sharia compliantness is basically adherence to Sharia via the application of two filters. One is business activity, another one is financial ratios.
Yep. There's another video of you explaining basically it's a chop, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was on the previous
Okay.
previous session. Okay, I have no other insurance except for the one suggested by the government for fear of falling into haram. But should I consider only health insurance?
Okay. Yeah, the ones that, okay, there are many scholars who consider that, what if the government provides the insurance to you, okay, then basically then there is no element of it being non-compliant. So if you take up the bare minimum, like for example, what's that called? Medishield, yes, Medishield, yes, Medishield and such. You should, because when you look at it from the necessities perspective, if you happen to go into hospital, you need these kind of things. Okay, so health insurance is one. Now you're asking only health insurance. Then my question back to the person who's asking this: what's your situation? Do you have a family? Do you have a wife? Do you have children? What happens if you are no longer around? Are they able to survive? How much do they get? Sit down with a financial planner. The financial planner will be then able to make calculations, okay, and give you an estimate. Say, Cik Sani, kalau you meninggal, your wife is going to be left with your CPF, and based on your current spending for your 2 children, this CPF that your wife receives is going to last her only for the next 5 years. Now, then you know that, then I may need to do something because it's a necessity. How can I leave my wife after that, fending for herself? Yeah. So really also it's a individual to individual kind of a situation.
We received this kind of questions recently as well. So I maybe it's because of your videos as well.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. How is insurance qualified as Sharia compliant?
Okay.
Takaful, right?
Yeah. So insurance, when you structure an insurance from a takaful perspective, it is basically not risk transfer. When the conventional insurance, basically the insurance company kind of underwrites you. If anything happens to you, we're going to make sure that you get this amount. It's basically that you transfer the risk of you dying over to the insurance company. Okay. Whereas in the takaful, it's very much a kind of like a pooling of the risks. We come together as a group. We agree if one of the members suffer a calamity, then a portion of this money will be used. So there is more of the structure. The contract is structured differently from that 2 broad examples I've given you. That makes it Sharia compliant. Again, it's very hard sometimes to see it from the surface, because on the surface it's exactly the same. The economic benefit is the same. Pay premiums, die, get payout. Whether it's Sharia compliant, whether it's a takaful, non-takaful, it's the same. So a lot of people fall in this trap that, what's the diff? I might as well take the conventional one than the Sharia one, because both give me the same benefit and whatever. But it's in the contracts which are different. And then again, one more time, I need to repeat. In the Sharia contract, the 3 elements like Gara, Mashir, Riba are not present, which are very important because we know what the prohibition of Riba brings us.
All right, moving on. It's now a good time to invest since markets are going down.
Yeah.
Okay. Since markets are going down and recession fears are very, very loud.
So it's really a question of time horizon and your type of risk profile and so on. So you really need to sit down with a advisor, investment advisor to answer this question. By and large, just to answer it in general terms, of course, yes. We all know basically that investing in times of recessions are probably the time where you can actually make a lot of money, because after all, economies are cyclical. They're cycles. They go up and they go down. When they go down, you eventually go back up again. Okay, but you need to have the time horizon to wait, because sometimes when it goes up, it doesn't go up immediately. It takes a long time. You need to understand, you need to diversify, because if you put everything in the US, the US doesn't go up, but Asia goes up, you get caught out. So there are a lot of things that you need to make sure before you invest, and not just, it's a recession, so I invest. Yeah.
Okay. Then would cashback be considered as equivalent to interest?
Well, I think.
Sorry, Mr. Ni, you are muted. No, you're mute. You're still muted. Yeah. You're muted. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I had problem with the thing. Okay. So basically, would cashback be considered an equivalent to interest? I'm assuming this is the big question, of course, is the instrument that you're using. Okay, if you're using basically a conventional credit card with cashback, okay, the controversial part is it's already a haram instrument because it's a conventional credit card. Okay, so the element of cashback also is like it's controversial from that perspective. Okay, if you have a Islamic credit card, which then gives you cashback, then you have very little to worry about because that would have been taken care of lah. In order for the card to be Islamic in nature, everything that the card does, whether it's cashback or whatever the case is, has to be Islamic. Okay, so that is quite clear. Okay, so while things like cashback are not doesn't look as though it's prohibited, the fact that the instrument is makes it a bit dubious from my perspective. It's the same with, for example, if people approach me and say, "What if I use my credit card and do 12 months zero interest rate or zero interest installment?"
Yep.
Okay. Some scholars would say fine because there's no interest involved in it because you don't pay interest. Some scholars will say you're utilizing a card which at the end of the day, while you don't pay interest, of course sometimes the merchant does pay a certain amount. It's a haram. You're utilizing a haram instrument basically. And that's the discomfort comes from that. Because you want to get away from anything that's got to do with riba. And yet you are involved in keeping this riba or utilizing this riba instrument, although that particular aspect of it, yes, of course, doesn't have riba, but you're still utilizing it at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay. So this is cashback. This one is optional if you want to answer. If not, I can pass it to Ustaz Harun.
Which one?
I cheat to him. Darul Ifta Azhar University and former Sheikh of Azhar, Mahmud Shaltut and Al Sanhuri and other Islamic banking scholars opined that interest is not equal to riba. Is this true?
Okay, I think there are certain scholars, even in Pakistan, right, who had mentioned something about this. Let me approach it slightly different, and I think I've answered this in one of your videos, in fact. Okay, and I won't try and repeat myself, but I just want to keep it very short. I'm an economist. I'm not an Islamic economist. I'm a conventional economist. I took a master's in applied economics from NUS. I've been an economist for many years itself. Okay, in the conventional world itself, today we are already when I say we as conventional economists, we are already debating the sustainability of our current monetary system, which is based on leverage and interest. Can you imagine that non-Muslims are doubting whether this monetary system that we have, which is based on interest and leverage, is actually harmful to the overall, not only to environment, but the overall workings of the global economy? And yet we have Muslims who are now at the level whereby interest is not riba. Allah in His majesty and knowledge knows things which we do not know. And He knows the repercussion of interest. And that's where that video which I had the last time, which clearly explains interest is not, an economy which is based on interest is not sustainable. An economy which is based on interest will eventually collapse. And how can Islam basically allow for an economy which eventually will collapse by saying interest is okay? Allah will never allow that.
Right. Do you want to add anything? No, that's all. Okay.
I want to do the example, but I think it will take time. But I think that if you have that video, that you can post it to the participants lah. where I explain why interest is not sustainable.
It's an economist explains why riba is halal.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and that's why people sometimes say, "Hey, 1% interest won't hurt anybody lah."
Mm.
20%. I understand money lenders should be haram, but banks 1%. Fact of the matter, when Allah haramkan alcohol, did Allah say you can take 0.1 milligram, you can take 1 milligram of alcohol, but you cannot take 10 you can take 10 I don't know, I don't even know how to calculate alcohol. You cannot take 100 milligrams, or it's okay to take a small little sip of wine. It's good for your heart anyway, but it's not good to take 4 bottles of wine. Some people take 4 bottles of alcohol, and I think they're still okay. They still stand, and nothing happens to them. Correct? Some people just take a little bit. How do you differentiate? How do you differentiate where that line is, which makes alcohol in terms of quantity halal and haram? You cannot. And it's the same with interest. You cannot tell me that 16% interest is prohibitive. Why? Because in Indonesia, interests are all 16%. And that's how the economy works. And you cannot tell me that 1% is okay, because in certain countries, 1% is not okay. That's the way. So Allah says blanket. It's like alcohol. Blanket cannot.
Blanket ban, yeah. Correct. That's true. Okay, we move on to the next.
Yeah, I'm getting worked up. Next one.
Paying premiums for
is paying premiums for insurance and never getting
to utilize it.
I wouldn't call it riba. It's not riba per se, and in Ridwan you can jump in on this. I don't think paying premiums and not getting to utilize it, because riba by definition is excess. I don't know whether this is one way of defining riba. We may need to get back to this one. Good question, but I've never thought of it whether you define that as riba or not. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't answer that. Yeah.
Okay, can.
Un-Islamic banks also using debt-based money from compounding interest currency, so won't they also be participating in riba as well? Okay, so 2 things here. Islamic.
I think my video is something wrong. Okay, aren't Islamic banks also using debt-based currency? So wouldn't they also be participating in riba as well?
Okay, you just have to think about this. Because we mentioned that all things that need to be Sharia compliant have to comply to did Ridwan disappear? They have to comply to non-riba, non-mashir, non-gara, then you can become Sharia compliant. So Islamic banks have to operate under that pretext, meaning to say that they cannot have these elements in it. So a lot of things that are undertaken in the Islamic economy, Islamic banking system, is driven by and large, not totally, by and large by profit sharing. Okay. So from that perspective, you will find that basically you may find Islamic banks saying we will pay you 1%, okay, but don't get mixed up. That 1% is not interest. That 1% is profit sharing. I can always take $50 and change it to what we call implied interest, which it's not interest. It's just what the nominal amount is implied in terms of interest. So don't get mixed up. Sometimes when we talk about banks, when you see them using Islamic banks, when you see them using certain percentages, that those are basically interest. It's just a representation of the profit sharing from a applied interest perspective. Okay, but to be Islamic, they must adhere strictly to the prohibitions of cannot have riba, cannot have mashir, cannot have gara, and so on and so forth. Okay, so from the individual banks itself, one would expect that they would actually adhere to that. Okay, then comes to another level, which is, can Islamic banks actually operate really truly free of interest in a so-called overall environment where interest is still the overarching thing? And of course, the answer is no. They cannot run 100% away from it. I know people are arguing that Islamic banks are sometimes non-Islamic because they still operate. Yeah, true. Unless we create a total 100% Islamic a financial system, which I think there are only two in the world. I think Iran is one, and used to be, was it Sudan? I don't know whether one knows. I
No.
All right.
Yeah, Sudan. You mean full
Totally,
Islamic?
full Islamic, yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
Sudan.
yeah. And even Saudi has an Islamic banking system running side by side with a conventional system. So yes, I would agree with the question that it's hard for Islamic banks to move away because we do, at the end of the day, operate within a wider framework of non-Islamic environment. But on an individual bank basis, I think they try as hard as they can to adhere. So I know there are many doubters out there. I personally would say, as I mentioned in the slides, if you want, there's one very famous person I know, who will say basically they are the same. Islamic banks, non-Islamic banks. Why? Islamic banks, and I'm probably quoting him correctly, are hypocritical. I might as well just go and bank with a conventional bank, and he openly says he does bank with a conventional bank because there's no difference. Okay, I disagree based on what I've just taught everybody, because if it's me, not him, if it's me, when I stand in front of Allah next time and Allah asks me the question, why did you bank with a conventional bank when there was an Islamic bank? I don't think I can get away with answering because the Islamic bank is not Islamic. Because Allah's going to ask me, what makes you think that the Islamic bank is not Islamic? Well, because they operate within this thing. Well, that was the situation. The bank did as best as it could. No, they did not do. How do you know they didn't do as best as they could? How do you know what's in the hearts of people when I, the creator of this universe, knows what's in the heart of individuals? Who are you to say that you assume that they were not acting in good faith? So that's where we take the burden onto ourselves, and I think it's very hard to answer on the day of judgment. So I rather just say this bank is Islamic, and I will take it at that value that it is Islamic. Okay.
Understand. Sorry, my mother is using Netflix as my the internet session. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think we'll move on to the next question. Can we use CPF monies for investment?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
There's only one investment which is Sharia, there's only one CPF investment which is Sharia compliant. It's Franklin Templeton equity. So the unique thing is we have one Sharia compliant CPF investment which is equity. We don't have the Sharia compliant sukuk, which is CPF investment. So we ended up telling our Muslim clients, when you make your investment via CPF, you always have two components, equity and bond. That's how you manage a portfolio, right? You put equity and bonds together to create your risk profile. The equity part, we have the solution for Sharia compliance. The bond part, we don't have. Keep it in your CPF. Treat the CPF as that bond part because there's nothing you can do. You don't have a Sharia compliance. Oh, then never mind, put it into a conventional bond. Why are you taking one haram to put into another haram? I just leave it there. Because when you leave it there, there's even a viewpoint from MUIS that CPF monies are Sharia compliant. You straight away put it into a conventional bond, there's no viewpoint that is Sharia compliant. Yeah. So we ended up creating a CPF portfolio, which is half using Sharia compliant unit trust, half is keeping the money back in CPF.
Okay, that I look forward to looking at it. Okay, moving on. Aren't Islamic banks? Okay,
we answered that.
Answered this one already. Is paying premiums for insurance never getting to this one? Is
we've done also. This one I couldn't answer. If we can get back to
Tai Chi to
Aaron.
what forms of halal investments are available for us? This one you mentioned just now.
Yes, there are well, at least half a dozen Sharia compliant unit trusts, equities, and sukuk. Yeah.
Okay. Your opinion on dependence protection scheme? Should I continue paying the premiums?
Yes, allowed. Again, government-related schemes. I think the scholars, the majority of scholars is it's allowed.
It's allowed. Okay.
Yeah.
How can cryptocurrency be deemed Sharia compliant? This is an old question, but then it's up to you. It's up to you.
Okay. Why can't it be deemed Sharia compliant?
Why can't it be Sharia?
It's you see, okay, so basically most scholars treat it as a commodity. Okay. And when it's a commodity, basically then it's straightforward, like any other commodity. It's Sharia compliant. Okay, let me put it this way. There are three different groups of scholars who look when they look at crypto. One is outright cannot. Okay. And those are who probably even view it as currency, so tabli. Then the other extreme is those who say can, because they are viewed as commodities, so therefore it's considered to be Sharia compliant. There's the middle group who basically views it as commodity, but still do not want to give it a Sharia compliant chop. Why? Because they attach conditions to say that while it is a commodity, it is not being traded in a safe manner, it's still highly risky. So Malaysia was for a long time in that group where cryptos were not considered to be Sharia compliant. Not so much that I think the scholars weren't in agreement that it's a commodity, therefore it is, but there wasn't any regulated exchanges where you could actually safely trade cryptos or buy cryptos. You ended up buying from overseas, which was non-regulated by Security Commission or Bank Negara. So when Malaysia came out with its own digital exchanges, where you could actually have SC, Security Commission regulated exchanges, DEXs, they call it DEXs, okay, straight away it became compliant. It became Sharia compliant. So you can actually trade, and these are fatwas issued by the National Fatwa, the SC Fatwas, SC Commission, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I think one or two others, I can't remember, are considered to be Sharia compliant as long as you trade them via the regulated exchanges.
Okay, we have a lot of questions that are interesting. I think the ones that are very application based or very practical, then we'll touch on it if you don't mind. Okay, how is gold different from other types of investments? I think this one you have alrahanu.sg. If you want to share about it as well.
No, that one will be more. Yeah, that will be the what do you call pawn shop side, right? Yeah, but just from the gold itself, gold has for the past not even 1,400 years, what 2,000 years. In fact, the dinar and dirham isn't an Islamic money. It's basically prior to that, the Romans were already using gold and silver as money itself. Okay, and if you understand what the characteristics of money is, has to be something which is scarce, easy divisible, and a few other elements. So gold actually fits into that particular characteristic, which makes it into very much easy to use as or acceptable form of money. Okay. In the modern world, since we have fiat money, which is money created by the central banks and such, then gold has fallen out of favor to be used as money because no country in the world now uses gold. Everybody prints their own money. Okay, so gold has been pushed to one corner of the room, okay, to be treated as if there are issues with the printed fiat money. This is where you can go and seek safety from, because you do not have to worry about people printing gold. There's no way you can print gold. And this has been historically for the past 2,000 years, something which has widely been accepted as a safe haven in times of crisis and such. Okay. When 1 week ago, the British pound tanked and the British financial system almost came to a Lehman Brothers type of situation, okay, two things went up. Two things happened. The volume of Bitcoin traded on exchanges went to historical levels. Gold coin bullions, gold coins, sold out throughout the whole of UK. That shows you the reaction of people when fiat money comes under duress. These are the places you seek to get away from that, which is gold and what I call Bitcoin even now, taking some of that characteristic. Okay, so that is the role of gold in my view. So the pros of gold is to have 10%, maybe 15% of portfolio. That will be the insurance against any of this kind of situation. The cons of gold is basically it's a slow moving asset which will frustrate you when other things are going up. It may not move up as fast. If you draw a chart of equities and gold, you'll find that equities have outperformed gold in terms of return. Gold, in my view, is not an investment where you're going to make. At certain times, you will make good money because in certain periods it just jump a lot. It does, but it doesn't provide you that consistent return that equities provide you. Okay, so I tend to see it more as a insurance part of a portfolio, and I use it unless I have a really strong view that I think it's going to go up very strong in the next 12, 18 months, then there's a tactical reason behind it. But otherwise, it's very much a small little part of that insurance part of the portfolio.
Yeah, I see. Oh, okay. We have gone 30 minutes above time. I think
we take a few more, then
few more.
then we call it.
Can.
We have 3 here, right?
This
Or
one.
3 or 4, yeah.
Then I think this one it's just basically Wahid. There's no more. I mean, you can access Wahid, but you can access Sarwa. It's a robo-advisor based in UAE. We have an article on that. You can check out our website. Available platforms to invest. Besides Fiwa, there's also other financial advisors, as well as in IFSC, you'll later receive an infograph of all the available investments in Singapore. Some of it is exclusive to Fiwa, some of it is on a standalone investment. So you can access that, and you can just ask us if you want to know more about these investments. Local medium companies out there that we can directly invest in. I think Mr. this one is basically Capital Bulls or Atis, Maidan, and now Wahid X.
Yes,
they have changed to Wahid X. Any other companies that you know of? Curate Capital.
Unfortunately, I can only comment sometimes on not sometimes. I can only comment on regulated investments.
Yes.
Yeah, so it will have to come from you. Mine is more unit trust and stuff like that. The boring stuff lah.
Okay. Okay. This one, I'm subscribed to a Prudential ILP every month. Is that haram? If it is, how do I dispose of the money as I have a substantial amount inside?
Okay. So few things. Number one, ILP basically, I think is this a 101? 101 means there's a lot more going into investment and very little going to protection. That I'm assuming that's the type lah. Okay. Number one question is the investment portion you can control. I'm not sure whether Prudential has Sharia compliant investment, because if there is, then you can switch it over to a Sharia compliant. I know AIA recently introduced some Sharia compliant unit trust. Okay, Prudential, I'm not very sure. Okay. Next, the question is that haram? Answer is yes, it is, because it's a non-Sharia compliant investment. Okay. Where's the question? Oh, no, question got real. Okay. How do I dispose of the money? Then the question now is, why did you take it up in the first place? And I mean it from the perspective of was there an objective? Was it for your retirement? Was for your child education? Was it for a certain reason? Okay. Has that reason been met? Do you need the money now, or you haven't reached to that point where you need the money? Was it for your retirement, but you're still saving for your retirement? Okay. So the reason I'm saying that is because even though it's haram, okay, to just dispose of it now and switch to something else, you also must take into account basically you're now older. You may have suffered some illness or whatever the case is, or things like that. I'm not sure about these policies. To move to another policy, you may not be able to get onto the other policy because you are now of different age, different health condition, and so on and so forth. Okay. So sometimes, despite the fact that it is haram, you may still find that because the alternatives make you worse off, you stick to this thing. Okay. Except that when you reach that point where you exit, when you reach your retirement goal, when you reach your goal, which is, let's say, for example, retirement, when you exit, it goes back to the example I said the last time. You take back your principal, okay, the gains, you then ask yourself, I took it up for retirement. Do I still need this money to supplement my retirement? If I need the money to supplement, do I need 100% of it? Do I need 75, 50%, 25%, whatever you decide which is the amount? If you say you need 100% of it because I have no other retirement sources, then that money becomes halal because it is a necessity for you to survive during your retirement. If you have built up other sources of retirement and this is just pocket money to you, that is when you dispose of the money because it is not the necessity to you anymore. Yeah. So to us, when we came up with this fatwa, we took into consideration that Islam is basically a merciful religion, i.e., while it wants you to adopt what is halal, it also has to take into consideration the reality of things. Like if I switch, if I get rid of this, can I obtain another one because I've of a different age group, of a different health condition, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Understand. Okay. So hopefully that person has maybe he or she may want to consult Faiwa also. Okay. I think we'll take two more questions.
Okay,
can. If Islam promotes benevolent loan or qard hasan instead of interest-based loan, wouldn't the creditor's money be eroded by inflation if it's, for example, a 5-year loan?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will definitely. If there's inflation, if there's disinflation or deflation, then of course the other way around. But if there's inflation, which typically is the case, then it is. Okay. But then you must ask ourselves, do we as Muslims give loans to earn interest? We don't. First of all, we must understand that the people who take the loans they are only encouraged to take the loans if they are in dire need to take a loan. They're not encouraged to take a loan to go on holiday and buy a car and stuff like that. They're saying, Islam says, if possible, don't take a loan. But we're not closing the door for you to take a loan because we understand that basically at certain points in your life, you may need to take loans for basic necessities like food, shelter, clothing, and such. Okay, and necessities. And so Islam says, the rest of the community, you need to be the one to provide help out. Of course, by means of charity is fine, but not everybody can do that. People still want back their money. Okay, and you give. Yes, if there's inflation, unfortunately, you will be eroded. But I think that's where again the principle of this world is temporary, the hereafter is permanent. Okay. Yes, there's inflation. Okay, but it's okay. I will get my rewards in another time and place.
Okay. Can I think this one
no, talk to your advisor.
I'm right. I think last one. This one of course crypto again. I thought insurance saving policies start with interest. I bought insurance saving policies start with interest and it has health cash.
I think I kind of answered it. So.
Is it? But
yeah. So my health condition has changed. Yeah. So we believe that don't just because I've like scared the wits out of you by telling you about riba that tomorrow you go and surrender all your insurance policies. Don't do that.
Yes.
Okay. Sit down if you can with someone who understands this. Okay. And then like I said, it does not necessarily mean that you have to get rid of your non-Sharia compliant insurance because you had taken it up with an objective. Situations, circumstances have changed. If you can take the change in circumstances, very much like you can take a loss in your investment, do it. Allah will reward you for doing so. But if you cannot take that change because of change in health, change in age, change in circumstances, you cannot get back the same type of insurance, then the other aspect applies, i.e., continue with it. When you get the payment, decide at that point whether those payments are necessity or not.
Understand. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, this one, if you
So we
want,
kind of answered. Yeah.
can either approach Fiverr or approach your consultant again.
For which one?
Yeah. No, this one. Yeah, the same question just now.
Oh yeah. I think I answered that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's more than.
Do we have a lot? Do we have a lot of questions?
Okay. Why is there no takaful? Why is CJCMB's the stock Sharia compliance? Sometimes it's halal.
Yeah. Some there are different rule books. Some of them measure it in different rule books. You must be methodology. Yes, correct. You must make very sure that some of these places, and I'm not saying this MuslimExchange.com, but I've seen others who merely say we believe this to be halal, but they don't tell us what is the methodology. So I suspect it's a lot of like I think this is okay. You must be very careful with these kind of places. It has to be based on IOFI rule book, Malaysian KRSE whatever rule book, or Security Commission rule book, Bank Negara rule book, this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
why is there no still takaful? Well, we have to ask the insurance companies. It's a commercial decision by them. Maybe there's not enough 500,000 Muslims in Singapore, 100,000 households, not big enough a market for them to issue takaful.
Yeah. If you don't know
Is paying zakat? No, zakat is compulsory. Purification is basically separate. It's you receiving money from a company where parts of it is considered to be haram. You need to purify the haram part. Zakat is compulsory, different.
Okay. Bank savings haram. I mean, bank savings interest is haram.
Yes, haram. Even though it's 0.1%, it's haram. Yeah.
Okay. Or 1.6% the trust bank. Okay. Okay.
No, let me tell you, we have Muslims, again, I'm not mentioning, we have Muslims who say, bank pays me only 0.5%. Zakat takes 2.5% from me. I'm now losing money on my bank savings account when I pay zakat. Do I have to still pay zakat? Of course you have to. It's compulsory. It's non-negotiable. It's part and parcel of being a Muslim, because when you say La ilaha illallah, you have to adhere to the other 4 things below that. Yeah, so it's part and parcel of it. Yeah. Technical analysis permissible. Yeah, it's a skill. It's a skill. It's part of it's there's nothing about technical analysis which I think is haram. No.
Yeah. Last one. How to be more aware of knowledge. No, sorry.
Well, if you attend, it's either you attend courses to understand how murabaha, wakala, all these kind of things are structured.
Yes.
Otherwise, the banks will be able to give you the contracts. Because as a client, you'll be able to get a contract. It's just that whether you understand the contract is a different thing.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Or you can also join. There's a lot. There's an article on our website on where to learn Islamic finance. One of it is this course itself on the forefront, alhamdulillah, and to many more runs, inshallah. Okay, so actually that ends our risk management foundations for today. Inshallah, there'll be an risk management intermediate run, and this will be held on the 19th and 20th of November. So not just Mr. Sani, but also his deputy, Ustaz Harun, will be not sharing the stage, but sharing 2 days separate. So Mr. Sani as well as Ustaz Harun on both different days. And they will be covering in depth on the 6 topics mentioned: investments, personal finance, debt management, risk management, zakat, wakaf, as well as estate planning. So if you want to join, do look out for that email. We will be sending it maybe 1 month before, and you'll have a special discount code for you to enter so that you can have a special price basically. Okay, so besides that, if you have any questions for Mr. Sani, you can just pass it to us. We'll pass it to him. Alternatively, you can also join our Telegram group, which is listed inside the chat. And we have answered some sort of controversial questions. Forex, is whole life plans permissible? and a few of other things lah, basically just like just now the endowment lah and hospitalization lah and whatnot lah. So if you have any questions, you can just share it there as well, and we'll pass it. If not, if you can answer, we'll pass it. We'll tai chi it to Mr. Sani. Yeah. Okay. So if there's nothing else, we'll end the session with Tasbih Kafaro and Suratul Asr. And yeah, you can make your way lah after this. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
See you
Yeah.
guys in the next session of
Thank
Risk
you.
Management Intermediate.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sani.
Thank you. May whatever knowledge I give to everybody be a wakaf. So please use it. Thank you very much. Okay, inshallah. Take care.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Alhamdulillah.